Welcome to my space station. So, I like reading about space and astronomy, and I usually share some interesting facts about it on my channel. So, as you can see, kind of obvious. I also like reading about history and world wars. So, like a few days ago, I was reading about the Warsaw Pact. I thought, why not share some interesting facts about it and NATO? So, let's get into it. Now, the Warsaw Pact was signed in 1955 in the city of Warsaw in Poland, and it was aimed at containing the Western expansion, mainly the NATO. Now, NATO was signed in 1949 in the US, and NATO is short form for North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and its purpose was to contain Soviet expansion. So, these two, a lot of similar alliances trying to compete with each other, and this is what we're going to talk about in this video, how they compare, the differences and the similarities. So whenever many people think about Warsaw Pact, including me, I think basically of NATO but version of the Soviet Union, and it really is. The Warsaw Pact was founded in 1955, and it was founded by the Soviet Union and many of its satellite states such as Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia and Poland. So these states and some others joined together to form the Warsaw Pact. Now the Warsaw Pact's aim was to contain the Western expansion. Now on the other side, there was formed NATO in 1949. NATO was just a lot like the Warsaw Pact but of the Western allies. The US, Canada, France, the UK, and Germany, and some other nations were the founding nations of NATO. Now, NATO was more of a defense treaty, and the Warsaw Pact was more of an economic treaty. So, the main purpose of the Warsaw Pact was to contain the Western expansion, but also to give economic support to the other nations such as Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, and the others. And the thing about that separated Warsaw Pact and NATO was that what the Warsaw Pact was like dominated by a single country, which was the Soviet Union. The Warsaw Pact was like fully dominated by it. Most of the decisions only it took, and well, there was little to no say the other countries had. But take NATO. They had a voting system in which there will be like a voting session, and then any country would veto it, but their decision would not go through. This was a more democratic side, and this also shows the ideological differences between this. The Warsaw Pact was more inclined towards communism, while the NATO was more inclined towards democracy and capitalism, which showed the ideological split between these two. Now, another very nice similarity between these two is that they both had something like the Article 5. The Article 5 is actually NATO, which said that an attack on one member is considered an attack on all members. This article was not in the Warsaw Pact, but there was like this general agreement. It was not official, but it was just there. It existed. That okay, if one of these countries attacked, then the Soviet Union will give you military aid and economical aid, so that you can like ward off the invasion or something like that. But it was not made official, so it's possible that a country gets invaded but no one does anything. So now here comes the question of which was more effective. Was the NATO more effective or the Warsaw Pact? In my opinion, it was NATO. The only purpose of the Warsaw Pact was to contain the Western countries and to provide economic aid. But then the Warsaw Pact also got dissolved later in 1991. So when it had fulfilled its purpose, when the Soviet Union had dissolved, it actually got the Warsaw Pact dissolved a few months after the Soviet Union fell. So this showed that the Soviet Union was really the only country in there. There was others, but it showed that the Soviet Union had so much dominance that when it fell, the entire Warsaw Pact fell. Now NATO also considered dissolving, because what was NATO's purpose? Contain Soviet expansion. But NATO thought against it, and nowadays NATO, even though the Soviet Union does not exist anymore, NATO functioned as an economical alliance for all of the countries in the northern hemisphere around the Atlantic Ocean. So it's not just on the war side, they also give economical aid and also play a big part in the politics of the world. If there's a war, say the recent wars in the Middle East, yes, they will come to your aid, but they can't give you military aid because they're based around the North Atlantic. So that's why I think what makes them more effective, because they don't only look at what happened in the Cold War, they want to think about the future, they're more optimistic. And they have a more democratic approach, which contemplates the Soviet Union's approach, where it has all the power. So at the end of the day, both of the alliances were very good. They offered economical aid as well as military, but at the end, NATO just outshined Warsaw Pact just a little bit. So this is all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and maybe next time we'll also talk about something about history.